I think if you try to reach absolutely everyone, you're going to reach no one.
From TV news desk to running a successful YouTube channel.
They want somebody who feels real. YouTube, I think, is more authentic.
In this episode, I chat with former news anchor Bridget Bennett about her jump from traditional news media to running the highly successful and fast-growing MarketBeat YouTube channel.
And so if you want them to connect with your company, this is where you have to be.
We also look at the new way people consume information and challenges traditional media faces in the age of instant access platforms like YouTube.
Everyone's there. That's how a lot of people consume media now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how everyone watches.
This is the Video Lab show where I have high-value conversations with experts in video marketing, video content, and video platforms. I'm your host, Caleb, and I've been helping businesses grow with video since 2012. I'm a video content creator, coach, and founder of the Video Lab, a content studio located in downtown Sioux Falls, South Dakota. If you're a business or individual wanting to learn more about how video can help you create more awareness, build trust, and generate more sales, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any other future conversations. Here's my conversation with Bridget and the lessons we can take away from her experience in media. Well, Bridget, thanks so much for being on this episode. So good to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for thinking of me for this.
Now, I was so pumped that you agreed to be on this episode because I feel like your expertise, like where you come from in news broadcasting, for this topic of what we're talking about from like kind of a more traditional media standpoint to kind of like a new media standpoint. I mean, new within the last several years, probably.
Right.
Like, I'm so excited to hear your perspective on this from the newscasting to now. Do you consider yourself a YouTuber?
I am officially a YouTuber. I am every elementary school's kid's biggest dream, right?
I know that's the number one job. Like when people, it used to be like baseball player, right? Like I want to be a baseball player or an astronaut. What is it now?
YouTuber.
A YouTuber. Now you are kind of in the, I don't know, an area of YouTube that probably a lot of the kids are not watching. Can you just explain a little bit like what you're doing now that you're off the news desk?
Yeah, now that I was on the news desk for like 13 years total, doing live broadcast news, and now I switched to doing news still, but it's stock market news.
Yes,
so
let's go.
Yeah, I'm at MarketBeat, and MarketBeat does stock market news. They've got a very successful website, and they started about a year and a half ago a YouTube channel.
Yes.
And so I came on to start, all kinds of stock market news content every day.
Yeah.
We do a different individual stock story.
Okay.
And so it's YouTube, but my 9-year-old doesn't necessarily think it's the coolest form of YouTube, but it is YouTube.
Oh yeah, it definitely is YouTube. And that is such a huge piece to businesses right now. Like having a YouTube channel. How have you seen kind of like, since I know that at the time of recording this, you haven't been at MarketBeat like a long time yet.
No.
But like, how have you kind of seen like the growth on just that YouTube channel, with, MarketBeat, you think emails, right? But like now with YouTube, that information coming across, what has that been like?
It's been an adventure for sure.
Yeah.
It is such a new medium to learn. So yeah, I've been at MarketBeat for about 6 months, and I've been on the YouTube channel for about 3 months.
Okay.
So I am in no way a professional YouTuber yet. I'm still learning a lot. But the biggest thing that I've learned in the transition is that you're reaching an audience right where they're at because everyone's there. That's how a lot of people consume media now.
Yeah, right.
It's just right on their phone, on their computer maybe. I mean, that's how everyone watches. And so you're right where everyone is. And I think the catalyst for MarketBeat wanting to start a YouTube channel is that that's the number 2 search engine out there.
Yes.
There's Google 100%. And then there's YouTube.
Yes.
And I think it's the best way to get your name and your brand out there.
Yeah.
It's just being on YouTube. And if you're not there and someone searches for you, you're missing that potential content and a new user.
Yeah. Now, how has this kind of been, coming from doing the news, like, being on the news desk, doing live, like how's that transition been? I mean, you're still doing like a bunch of interviews and things like that, right?
Yeah. It's a lot of the same skill set. And I always say this is one of my best things about this switch is being on camera, doing interviews. It's a very specific, like narrow skill set and field.
Yep.
And so it's great that YouTube is this ability to take some of those skills I had in broadcast and be able to still use them at work every day.
Yeah.
But it is a different way.
Yep.
YouTube, I think, is more authentic. But I will say this, in broadcast, I went to a really great journalism school.
Yeah.
I had some professors who worked with 48 hours, and I actually
Sweet.
got to work on a 48-hour shoot when I was in college. And
Amazing.
they were producers for national media at that time. And so been in the industry a long time. And they said, even back then, this was, 15, 20 years ago, that the best way to translate to someone on camera is to just be authentic.
Yeah.
To just be real, be the same person on TV that they would meet at the grocery store.
Yeah, right.
And I've always thought about that and kept that as, okay, be the same person on camera. Although especially on the news desk, you're a little bit more professional.
Yeah, right.
Like you sit up a little straighter and you talk a little. YouTube, I still do the same, mostly because that's I do that. Right?
Yeah.
But I still think I'm still me. You still get to see the same person. I think YouTube takes that even next level. You see, YouTube channels out there that have a ton of success sitting on their couch in their basement, just chatting to the camera.
Yeah.
And I think that is what people like. I think that's what the audience that's on
100%.
the internet right now is that they want somebody who feels real. They don't necessarily even need the credentials or anything. They just want someone who feels like a real person talking to me.
Yeah. I have a personal YouTube channel where I basically just talk about these cameras that I use. And so I go through like settings and things like that. And it's kind of funny because I feel like if I put a lot of effort, this is a side note, by the way, if I feel like I put a lot of like effort and time into making this YouTube video, then it doesn't perform well. But if I just like sit on the couch and just like talk, be real, right?
Yeah.
Those videos perform better for some reason. And it's kind of a crazy concept when it comes to YouTube.
It is a crazy concept. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm still learning what works on YouTube, what doesn't work on YouTube. I think there's this lens in journalism because broadcast is still, journalists and people take pride in being, in journalists with integrity and not just trying to get the clickbait. We want to give you information and we're professionals and we know what we're talking about. And so there's that level of like professionalism. And there's one thing to be said about traditional media in that there's some professional standards.
Yeah,
there's
100%.
There's industry standards. There's checks and balances with the corporations that own you of like, these are the standards for the kind of background you need before you're going to give this kind of news coverage. YouTube doesn't have any standards. There are no standards.
You might get flagged for using a song or something, but
there's like copyright.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. But other than that, there's not much.
Yeah, right.
And anything works. I mean, really anything can work. And so I think that's what I'm learning. I think I took the Market Beats channel. We took the approach of trying to be more professional because we are stock market news and trying to be more professional. And it works and it looks nice and it looks professional. But I don't know if it's the right way yet.
Interesting.
I still don't know. Because, I think if I'm thinking about investing money and who am I going to trust to listen to, I want them to look legitimate.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of financial news channels out there that is just a guy in his basement.
Isn't that crazy?
And they get a lot of views.
Yeah, right.
And they get a lot of views.
Yeah. Interesting.
It is. And the thumbnail, I know you know all about this.
Yeah, thumbnail is everything.
So that's also a switch from journalism a little bit. Is I think journalism, they try to be less clickbaity. They still want that SEO traffic and they want to get your attention, but they want to do it in a more like that professional, we are the news kind of way. And I think on YouTube, it's all about getting the clicks because you can make the best content out there, but it's got to be a little clickbaity.
Yeah, totally.
For people to.
And that's such an interesting piece to this because are you doing some of the thumbnail design or is your team doing it?
I'm doing a lot of it.
Yeah,
so
sweet.
We have a graphic designer who helped build some templates and we changed that in the last few months.
Yeah.
And we went with that professional look. And I think for me personally, it's hard because I feel like I've built a little bit of a personal brand, especially as like a news anchor and a journalist. And so it's kind of hard to be like the pointing fingers and the cheesy faces.
It's cringe, right?
It's so cringe. And yet people click on it.
Yes, I know. Well, that's I've run some experiments on my personal channel. And it's like, I don't know why this is. If my face is not in it, it doesn't get as many clicks.
Yes.
Which drives me crazy because I would love to just have a camera on the thumbnail and call it good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, well, I want people, it's a revenue stream for me. So I want like people to click on these videos and watch them and use the affiliate links to purchase things, right? So like,
Right. Absolutely. And I think everybody watching this is in the video industry probably, and so they know something about it. But I think some people who don't know how much time it takes to make videos, you're like, I spent a whole day making this video. I want someone to watch it.
Right.
And so you put in the effort. And so if it takes a silly face on YouTube to get someone to watch your video, then maybe it's worth it. I will say, and it's not just the face either. I think for a while I was trying just a headshot, like a professional headshot.
Yep.
That doesn't work.
Totally.
Does not work the same way as
some type of reaction that people can go with, right? Like, oh, it's crashing. The stock market's crashing. Like,
I don't know what this says about society that people enjoy clicking on those better, but I guess they do.
Yeah, that's the big piece, the thumbnails and then titles, right?
Right.
Like, how has that been kind of learning the process of like, yes, you don't want it to be clickbaity, but yes, you do want it to be clickbaity, especially when it comes to a title.
Especially a title, and on the thumbnail, that title.
Yeah.
We keep going more and more towards fewer and fewer words, like almost none at all.
Yeah.
It's almost
crazy.
It's almost better to not have any words.
Yeah.
Or have any description of what is this video about.
Yeah.
Like, we'll have the stock. Again, this is financial news, so it's slightly different.
Yeah,
but
totally.
We'll have an image that shows this is the kind of stock we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then maybe like, I think yesterday I did up 100% question mark.
Yeah.
Like,
and that was your title?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was it.
Wow.
And it worked. I mean, it did really well overnight.
Curiosity, maybe? Like,
curiosity.
What does this mean?
And it's giving people a reason to watch, but without giving them too much information.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that, I went to college for journalism. You had classes about how to write a good headline. And so that was a part of it, is you want to spark curiosity.
Yeah.
But I would say in a professional journalistic world, you're still doing more information in a headline than up 100% question mark.
Yeah. Now, have you noticed, like, with some of your titles, have you noticed, like, if it almost has a little bit more of a negative twist to the title, those performing?
There's a lot of financial news channels that do that kind of doom and gloom sites, and they get a lot of traffic. We are trying to stay away from that a little bit.
Makes sense.
In fact, I think a little bit about what we do is just, I think we get traffic from investors who are excited to hear that the stock that they invested in is doing well.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
They just want to watch a stock and they're like, well, I have that stock.
I feel good. I feel good about myself right now.
I feel good. I made a good choice. Like, my stock is doing well.
Okay.
And so we're finding success with those.
Yeah.
Popular stocks. We don't do a lot of videos talking negatively about a stock.
Yeah, interesting.
And I don't know if they perform as well.
Right.
They might generate a few more comments.
Yeah.
But I think that the ones that actually get views are talking about a popular stock that people own, and we say it's doing well and here's why, and we think it's going to continue doing well. People are like, yeah, I made a good choice.
Yeah. Now, I could talk about YouTube for hours because I love YouTube. I know that we're not going to spend like hours talking about this, but one of the things I like about YouTube is just the conversation that kind of gets created around your community,
right?
Whether that being your channel or a particular video, that type of thing. Like, how has MarketBeat or yourself kind of, I don't know if managing is the right word, but kind of like taking that conversation that happens in the comments of these videos.
Right.
What does that look like for you and MarketBeat?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest goals that I've had for the channel.
Yeah.
Creating that community, because I think that is a very similar concept to broadcast journalism.
Yeah.
Is that people want to have a relationship with you. They feel connected to
Yeah.
you. On broadcast journalism, it's in a small local community, right?
Yep.
So I'm out at the grocery store,
Yeah.
and everyone's like, oh, you're in my house every day.
Yeah.
And they build this relationship with you. And so what that looked like in broadcast was me having a personal Facebook account where I interact with people and they feel connected to you. And I think that interaction is so key on YouTube, is creating that community, creating that connection where they feel like they have a relationship with you because they're watching your content, they're talking to you in the comments, that sort of thing. The challenge with financial stock market news on YouTube especially are the bot comments. And we get hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to have a genuine community in the comments when you have 150 bot comments on the same topic.
I didn't think about that.
And I don't know if every channel gets that,
Yeah.
but ours is extreme. And I've been, doing my best to block the different.
And it probably, as the channel grows, that probably increases as well.
It does.
Like, I get it on my channel. So my channel is about 30,000 subscribers, like close to 30,000. And yes, I do get bots in the comments, but probably not to the extent of like 100,000 plus type channels. So that's interesting to try to kind of like combat that and like see who is like, what's this real conversation? Like, what's a real conversation happening?
And I do wonder, I think the reason the bot comments bother me is because I want to be able to create that community.
Yes.
And I wonder if you're watching a channel, you watch a YouTube video and you go to want to make a comment and you see 120 bot comments.
That kind of stop people maybe.
Does it stop people from interacting? And so managing that is difficult because they're constantly coming, and whoever has created these, they have endless number of accounts. It doesn't matter how many times you report spam, they just keep coming. So that is a unique thing, and it's very prevalent in the financial news. I've been looking at other channels. They're out there for everybody. It's not just us, but it's annoying.
Yeah, totally. Well, this is fantastic. So like I said, I was so pumped for you to be on here talking about this kind of like traditional media, right? That you have so much experience in. How would you define, wait. Let me finish my little intro first. Okay. So traditional media versus like kind of the new style of media, which we're going to get into some pieces of that here in just a little bit. But like going back now, how would you define kind of traditional media in the realm of like what we're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I think traditional media or broadcast media, like in the past, the reason broadcast became a thing is there were 3 options, right?
Yep.
You had one option to begin with, and then 2, and then 3. And so in the 1940s and 50s, broadcast really started to take off. And 60s and 70s were the heyday of broadcast, where every single night, families would sit down, they would make dinner, and they would watch the news together because that was the channel that was out there. And that worked for decades.
Yeah.
That was the model for decades. And it was your only competition were the 2 other news industries that you were competing with. Or let's take news out of the picture, and let's just say ABC, primetime TV, 7 o'clock CSI Miami seasons, like those shows.
TGIF.
Yeah.
Were you around for TGIF?
Or
was that before your time?
No, I was, but I think I was a kid at the time. I'm not sure, but I do remember like that was a thing.
So good.
But they're always the networks would compete against each other for ratings.
Yep.
But that was still the only competition.
Right.
And then cable came into the scene. And so there was more competition. Well, now, I mean, there's endless sources for media.
Yeah.
Like there's endless sources.
Oh, yeah.
You could watch Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels. You could be on TikTok.
Yes.
You can be on YouTube. You can maybe go to ABC on their app and check out their content, or Netflix on their app. Your means of getting media are endless.
Yeah.
And so that broadcast model becomes more and more complicated because you're not broadcasting.
Yeah.
You are. It's very hard to get a broad audience when there are endless options of entertainment. How, I think the Super Bowl today, in 2024 or 2025, the only time when you get a real, true, broad, captivated audience all watching the same thing is kind of the Super Bowl.
And that's only in the US primarily.
Yes.
Like if we think global.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's so different too with traditional versus non-traditional media.
Right.
The content we're putting out on YouTube, we get tons of interaction from different countries. Tons of people watching everywhere.
Yeah.
Versus, the local broadcast model was very local centric. I do think there's a need for that. I do think that there is a need for continued local news coverage and local content. People care about their local communities.
100%.
But what does that look like in the future? I'm not sure. Does the broadcast model still work? I think here in South Dakota and in the Midwest in general, I think the broadcast model works really, really well.
Right.
Because people are people of habits.
Yeah.
The farm communities, the rural communities are really good at they've formed the habit of watching news. But I think we're seeing in some larger TV markets across the country where those broadcast audiences are shrinking.
Yeah.
And the numbers just aren't anywhere where they used to be. And that is largely because there are just so many options that it's really changing the scene of what media looks like today.
Yeah. That's interesting because like I used to do some live streams on my personal channel, and I would have people tuning in from like Mongolia.
Yes. Oh.
Like I'm like, what?
Malaysia. My LinkedIn.
This is so crazy.
Yeah, my LinkedIn has like blown up with like requests from Malaysia and India and like all kinds of countries.
I'm like, what? what is happening here? It's like the world is just getting shrunk down to like a fiber optic cable or whatever. Okay. I could keep going on that too. So as we think of kind of like traditional media and everything, what are some of the biggest challenges that some of those traditional media outlets face, when trying to retain their audience as some of these like new forms, especially internet-based new forms of media grow in popularity?
Absolutely. I think it's staying relevant. I think and it's not new. I think it's becoming even more pressing now. But I would say my last decade in the news industry was, how do we stay relevant? How do we stay entertaining? And not to say, it's hard to say that when you're talking about news, you're talking about a shooting that happened. You don't want to say this is entertaining.
Right. Yeah.
It's not.
Yep.
But you have to do a level of production that is going to keep people's attention. Starting at Market Beat and them just starting a YouTube channel, I was kind of one of the first people in the company that had experience with video.
Yeah.
And I whenever I talk to someone who doesn't understand video editing or has never really been involved in it, they just consume it.
Yep.
I'm like, I don't think you realize about attention span here.
Oh man.
And so I do the count.
Huge.
If you've ever watched a video and done the count, and every time there's an edit, I'm like 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Like,
I better write this down.
But how often is there an edit? And if there is your screen is changing every 1 to 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think in traditional broadcast models, you might see the same shot on camera for 20 to 30 seconds.
Yep.
And
I can visualize that now. Yes.
Yes. So you have the same camera shot for 20 to 30 seconds. And because of cell phones and because of new media where you can have a YouTuber who has, some of the really successful channels, they have an edit every minute or every second to 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah. There's studies done on Mr. Beast's channel, right, about his style of editing.
Yes.
And just recently, probably within the last year, he actually slowed down his editing a little bit. But there for a little bit, it was like every, 2 seconds or every second or something, there was a new cut.
Yes.
In that edit.
Yes.
And so that's a lot of stuff that people don't think about. But with your expertise in that video field, it's like, okay, now I can bring this to the YouTube channel, see what this does to help growth.
Yeah. I think just retaining that audience, you have to keep their attention in some way. And I think edits are the best way to do it. But that, of course, takes time.
It does take time. Do you see traditional media outlets going that route, especially on TV?
I see more of it. I see way more emphasis put on the production value of shows.
Yeah.
And companies, the media. So other thing to know about the media industry is that these are very large companies.
Yeah, right.
I worked for Nexstar Media most recently. They own a huge share of TV stations across the country.
Okay.
They don't own just 1 or 2 stations.
Yeah.
They own 120. And there are just a few small conglomerates that own large amounts. And the biggest area they put investment into is the studio. They give you robotic cameras, very, very nice cameras, all with the design in mind of to produce that up, to give that, the movement that you can do, the different things that you can do camera work wise, production wise, to make this visually interesting, because they get it.
Yeah.
They know that this has to be visually interesting to keep someone's attention. Because that's just where we're at. I think that our phones have trained us.
Oh my gosh, yes.
To lose attention without some kind of change every few seconds. It's subconscious. People don't know that this is happening.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like those little things that just try to keep. And that's the thing. The platforms want that. Every platform, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok, they want you to stay on that platform as long as possible. And so if those algorithms see that people are staying on your videos, whether it's the editing or the personality or whatever, they're going to be rewarded. It's crazy. Okay, so from your experience as a news anchor, what strengths does the traditional media have still that you see that maybe it can adapt or to kind of still stay relevant?
Absolutely. I think I'm a huge fan of journalism. I think that it's important. I think that it's necessary. I think local journalism is important.
Yeah.
It's kind of more of I don't know, as a journalist, you feel altruistic in doing it because you feel like this is important, like this makes a difference in the world. I always said it wasn't even just our job as journalists to inform the community, but it's to help you care about your community.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
I like that.
I'm not just telling you that this shooting or this fire happened. I'm telling it in a way that I can help you care that this fire happened at this house. And I don't know what that means psychology-wise, if you're like manipulating emotions in any way, but I do think it's important to care about your community and knowing what's going on. I think when people know what's going on, they want to help.
Yeah.
That's just a thing. And so I think that is a strength of traditional media is being able to tell the stories of what's happening in your community and kind of rally that community action.
Yeah.
I think it's a safety issue. I think that there's, different things that happen in the public where you need some trusted source to go to.
Right.
And that's the main strength of, I think, traditional media is that there just are more checks and balances.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime I tell anybody that I used to be a news anchor or that I was in the news, you get the people who are like, well, I just think you're too liberal or I think you're too, there's people who think the news media has just got out of control. And so you have people already who distrust the media. That's been a big ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the media versus YouTube, anyone can say anything they want on YouTube.
Yeah. Right.
Anything at all.
Yeah.
And there's and you don't need any stats to back that up. You don't need a link to show here's where I found this information. You can really just say anything.
Take it as gospel because I'm saying it.
Because I said it. And I think that there's not a lot of not everyone has good media training or knowing like, okay, should I trust this information?
Right.
They heard it on a YouTube. And so this must be true.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of scary.
Yeah,
sometimes.
totally.
And so I think that I like broadcast journalism for that is just having kind of a higher standard of where did we get this information from? Yes, this YouTuber might be live streaming this shooting that happened, telling you this guy heard this and but as a journalist, I'm not going to report that until I have official confirmation that this happened.
Yeah.
Because how many times have we heard a report that someone has died when they have not? Or how many times have we heard a report about this thing happening that turns out not to be true or a fact?
Yeah.
And so I think I like having some kind of authority.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Of like, this is a legitimate source that I can trust that's going to give me real information. And I do think that news, traditional media needs to speed up a little bit sometimes because if I can find it on 15 sources online before you ever report it, that's kind of difficult too.
Right. I can't count the amount of times that, my two sons will come to me and be like, hey, can we do this? Because basically I saw it in a YouTube video. Or can we get this because I saw it in the YouTube video? Or my son, my youngest son likes watching like history videos. And I was like, let's maybe think through this a little bit. So it's like that whole, like, where is this information coming from? That's kind of, that's a little dicey.
It can be.
But one of the things that we've seen recently when it comes to like this new style of media kind of came in the form of this past election. So at the time of filming this right now, like we basically just got out of a presidential election. And one of the forms of media that really popped up strong was the video podcast. And what we saw were the candidates being on these video podcasts, which is something that we had not seen before in really like presidential elections. We have like the kind of the main forms of, the news stations, right? That, need to get their interviews in and things like that. But these candidates were jumping on these video podcasts and getting hundreds of millions of views. Now, as we kind of think of like the traditional media aspect of that, like, what is that telling us? That, these presidential candidates are jumping on these forms of content almost over like traditional interviews on some of these news stations.
I think that says that's where the viewers are.
Yes.
I mean, they want to go where the viewers are.
Right.
And I think that that's where people are.
Yeah.
People are just spending more time on their phones.
Yeah.
They're just getting think about the number of times, even just, you sitting down with your spouse and you're wanting to watch a movie together. And how many do both of you end up just scrolling on your phones?
Oh, yeah.
And finding some kind of content on your phone.
Yeah.
And so that is just, it's where people are.
Yeah.
That's where people just naturally go to right now.
Right.
Is to find their source of information just from their phone.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be there in order to make that work. And so the presidential, first off, I have to say, not being a part of the presidential election in any way was lovely.
Yeah, I bet that was like way different, huh?
It was great. It was really great. Politics have just gotten terrible.
Oh man, yeah. I can't imagine from like that news perspective. I can't imagine.
They always say that you're doing a good job of being non-biased if both sides think that you're biased. Like if you have Democrats saying you're too conservative and if you have conservatives saying you're too liberal, you're like, well, we must be doing...
There must be some middle ground there.
Yeah.
Right.
They're both mad. But anyways, it was great to not be a part of that. But I did see that change. Another thing to share is that during election years, media companies generally get tons of advertisers from, vote for Amendment G or vote for this candidate or that candidate. It's a huge money-making year for media companies, as that's where they make a ton of money, is on election advertising. And I think across the board, across the country, general advertising for these traditional media sources was down because they were finding more success advertising in non-traditional media. And that is also a testament to kind of where the eyeballs are.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing with media or advertising. They're very closely connected. It's where are the eyeballs and where are people watching?
Do you think so when I think of maybe like a traditional news interview, like a sit-down interview, I don't necessarily feel like that's a genuine conversation all the time. Like, yes, it can be, right? It can be. But I feel like with maybe some of these video podcasts and these candidates going on some of these podcasts, it turned into a little bit more of like a casual conversation. Yeah. Do you think there's anything in that regards as far as like maybe are people like just craving conversation and are people just like craving authenticity? And I'm not saying like all the candidates are authentic or whatever, but like just having like an authentic conversation and just like sitting down and just talking. Like, do you think there's anything to that? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I think it's a generational thing for sure too.
Yeah, right.
I think younger generations, they want to see something real.
Yeah.
And they don't believe the news anchor. That is something that I ran into too, is like instantly people thinking that you've got to be some like egotistical diva to want to be on to sit on the news desk. And I'm like, not at all, actually. But they just have an impression of like, that's fake. Like this is fake. This is all smoke and mirrors. And I think that people do crave conversation. I will say, I think that journalists who do it best just have a genuine conversation.
Yeah, interesting.
Every interview that I ever did with somebody, I cried right along with them.
Yeah, right.
I'm an emotional person. So we would have lots of tearful interviews with Bridget. But I think that that's important because it's real. And I think whether I do a video like this, just in a conversation, or a video with a professional news camera and it's going to go on the show that evening, I think there's some responsibility in sharing someone's story.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Like, I feel like you trusted me to be vulnerable enough to share what's going on in your life and to share your knowledge or insight, whether it's a professional or like an emotional story.
Yeah.
I think that I feel this like, I don't know, like, I feel responsible for sharing your story. I want to make you look good. I want to share your story well and communicate it in a way that people can understand and connect with it. I think connection is a good word too.
Yeah, I like that.
And that viewers are just looking to connect somehow.
Yeah.
And whether that's with the host or the presenter, whether that's with the story itself, the content itself, people just want to connect with something in some way.
Are you finding that with, some of the market beat videos that you're doing? Are you finding that connection with your audience?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get some more of that for sure. And I mean, I won't this is a reality of just being on camera.
Yeah.
There's that shallow factor of like, this host looks great,
Yeah,
right. Like that sort of thing. That's true in broadcast news as well.
Yeah, totally.
That appearance just matters. And that's, I think, successful channels, you find that too. But I think when people get past that and they're just like, oh, you seem like a person who genuinely cares, or who seems like, I can just tell that you're a kind of person. I think that is something that people connect with. They want to see a little bit of light in life. And I think,
oh man, yes.
I think that you can be that.
Yeah.
I know earlier you mentioned those doom and gloom channels.
Yeah, right.
People connect with that. If you're the kind of person who is a more doom and gloom person, and you can connect with the guy who's like, the world is coming to an end, and you're like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I've been trying to tell him.
Actually, maybe this afternoon. Oh man. Okay, so this is such an interesting conversation to me because, for so long, like newspapers before like TV, right? And then like even with recently newspapers going out of business and things. And it's sad, right? But it's like at the same time, it's almost like this shift that some of these companies and I'm not one to speak it like on huge companies that they know what they're doing, right? But it seemed like if they're going out of business, like where is that disconnect and why is that happening? And so like, I don't know, this whole traditional versus new media conversations, video podcasts, like it's just so intriguing to me. So maybe let's shift this a little bit from kind of that conversation to more like, so people viewing this might be like business owners that are interested in like video marketing or, kind of learning about different video platforms. We've talked a lot about YouTube, right? So for business owners, let's put our business owner hat on for a second. And like, what lessons can we learn from this conversation, specifically, but like the rise of video podcasts, the rise of like shorts, YouTube shorts, Instagram reels, like, what does that say, like how to engage with your audience?
Yeah, I think that point that we talked about just a little bit ago was connection.
Yeah.
People are looking to connect. And so if you want them to connect with your company, this is where you have to be. You have to be where the eyeballs are. And I think if people are on their phones, if they're on these platforms, if they're watching reels, if you want them to connect with your company, it's harder in a 10 to 30 second reel, but you can. How can you find a way to authentically connect your business to people right where they're at? And what does your brand have that people can connect with?
Yeah.
I think that's something to think about as a company too, because there is, whether you're in the financial world, whether you're, a daycare center or a nonprofit or something like that, people can connect with whatever it is that you have.
Right.
And so I think you just have to be where they are. If you're not on those platforms, you're not where they are.
Yeah, right.
So you have to be on those platforms, and then you have to do it in an authentic way that just people can connect with. And I hate to throw this out there, but you also have to be entertaining.
Yeah.
It's not just authentic, and it's not just your brand. It's also entertaining. And I think the brands that are entertaining are finding the most success.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're doing like educational style content, like there's that whole like edutainment. You know what I mean? I'm like, I got to make sure I say that right. Edutainment is like, how can you entertain but also educate at the same time? And, a lot of that too, like, if you have a service or a product or something that you're trying to get out there, create awareness around, like, who is your audience? Like, that's really what it comes down to, is like, make content for who your audience is. And it might take a little bit to kind of find that. You might know just like with past customers, things like that. But like when it comes to your video content, like who are you making videos for? And that's huge. Have you noticed that with MarketBee? Like you have a very targeted audience.
A very targeted audience, and yet I want to target it even more.
Yeah, interesting.
I think this is a part of the conversation of traditional versus new media.
Yeah.
Traditional media tried to target everyone. It's
broadcast.
Yeah. You want to make it so anyone at any age can understand it. In fact, when I was training people how to write for broadcast, I'd say you almost want to write at a 4th grade level, so that literally anyone can understand the content that you're putting out.
Interesting.
YouTube is not that.
Right.
You can specifically
Yeah.
target an audience,
Yeah.
and you're going to do better if you do.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think trying not to be everything for everyone, it's impossible to be that. I think if you try to reach absolutely everyone, you're going to reach no one.
Yeah.
You have to
Yep.
you have to find that very narrow, pinpointed audience of like, I want to reach people in this 20-year age gap,
Yeah.
of this gender and this income level and this, you know. I also have a degree, so I double majored in journalism and advertising.
Okay. Right.
And so this is like
Perfect storm.
It really is. It's like right in my wheelhouse
Yeah.
of understanding audiences of
Yeah.
like the more narrow you get,
Yeah.
the better you're going to do. And I think as a business, you're like, well, I want everyone to be my customer.
Right.
Right. I don't want to just
Not
narrow.
necessarily. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that you will find more success in growing your business
Yeah.
if you get the right customer
Yeah.
and the right customer pool, especially when it comes to media, because you're going to get the right person. And I think I'm already learning this about YouTube is that YouTube wants to get your video in front of the right audience.
Yes, exactly.
They want your video to go to the right spot. And so you have to know who is the right person in order for YouTube to know who the right person is too.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. And one of the things, like you already mentioned this, but like, so I have this YouTube workshop that it's free to take, and I'll have a link down in the description, but like I call YouTube the perfect storm. Like your education is the perfect storm for what you're doing, but YouTube is the perfect storm of a platform because of like 3 different reasons, right? So it's, first of all, it's fully search engine, right? You already said that. It's like the second largest search engine. I think you said that on this episode.
Yeah. Yes.
Second largest search engine behind Google, and it's owned by Google. So like YouTube is also showing up in Google searches anyway. But also what we're talking about, it's fully community driven. So you have these little pockets of communities, and if you make videos, like for me, for example, it's Panasonic Lumix cameras. Okay. So I make tutorial videos about these cameras, and you know what? The camera companies take notice of that. And so now I get to go to camera release parties and things like that. Right. So it's like contribute to whatever that community, there's like gardening communities, right? There's fixer upper YouTube channels and everything. Right. Yeah. But then also the third piece to that storm is like, it's fully video. So you're not having like any other types. Yes, there's the community wall that you can put posts on and things like that. But it's fully video. It's all video on YouTube. And so I think that's where like just having that success, if you're hitting those 3 pieces, you're going to have some success on YouTube and reaching potential clients or customers.
Absolutely. I think it's important to get people. You can't just be on YouTube and not know anything about video.
Right. That's true. That is true.
I do think that is important too, because I think people will be like, a business might see this and say, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I'll just start recording something and posting it on YouTube and see how it does.
Yeah.
And that's one strategy.
Yeah. That is a strategy.
That's one strategy. But I do think understanding what makes a good video and what is entertaining to people and just some of those nuances of like what will keep people watching is important.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely more that goes into it. Right. And just having some of that knowledge can go a long way. But reaching potential customers, the opportunities are there for sure. So we talk about like, YouTube as a platform. Let's talk about maybe some of the challenges now that people face. Like we talked about having just the skills, right? The skills to do it, but like this shift to kind of a new media standpoint where like really everybody has access to participate in this. I mean, it's not just like a news channel anymore. It's like, I mean, you were saying it. I mean, somebody could set up in their basement and start doing like stock market videos, but like there are, some challenges. Like what challenges do, professionals now like maybe transitioning into kind of like this from maybe traditional media to a new media, like what does that look like for maybe businesses that are looking to start doing some video and like participate on some of these video platforms?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing is attention.
Yeah.
To get the clicks, to get the eyeballs.
You're right.
There's so much competition out there. So your business, maybe there's 50 competitors or 5 competitors in your field, just like traditional broadcast used to have 2 or 3 competitors.
Right.
Well, YouTube, there are endless, countless competitors out there because you're competing for attention.
Yeah.
So how do you get anyone to watch your content because there's so much content out there? And I think that I think from a business perspective is, and then for me too, from a professional journalist perspective, is bending that muscle of like, I want to look professional, but I also need to get the attention.
Yeah.
So how can I do that with some integrity?
Yeah,
hopefully.
Totally.
And also keep the professional. I want to be a trusted business resource for people. You want to keep your company's brand intact. However, there is the attention piece that's just important. So I think if you're just starting this, if you're getting into this for your business, thinking about, I don't want to just, here is my company and here is what we do in the most professional way possible. How do you get someone to pay attention to the message you want to share? I just want to, I don't know, I keep thinking about this during this conversation is some of the successful ones that I've seen where professional nonprofits out there, when Gen Z writes the script, right? And you've got these older zoo workers who are like saying—
That blew up.
It blew up and everybody did it.
Yeah.
Everybody did it. But it's so great because it works.
Right.
And it still shares the message of that nonprofit or that zoo or that organization. But it also is entertaining.
Yeah.
To people of wide ages. Gen Z loves it. The older generation likes it too.
Yeah.
And so I think things like that are successful and funny, they give that entertainment value, but they still share a message.
Right.
There's still a message behind it. And that's that secret spot of like, how can I be entertaining, still getting my message across, and still have, you know, some integrity at the end of the day where I feel okay about what we did.
Man. You know, the unfortunate thing about this conversation, Bridget, is that we have to bring it to a close. You know, like, I feel like we just kind of barely scratched the surface of some of this stuff. It's been a super interesting conversation, but we do need to bring it to a close. And here's how I want to do that. Like, we had this conversation. Now, if somebody's watching this, they don't get anything else from this whole entire conversation. What's one thing that you would want somebody to take away from this conversation that we just had? One thing. And you could take a sec to think about it. That's fine.
I think the connection piece is the most important piece.
I love that.
I just think that people are looking for connection.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, this is a little sad, so I hate to end it this way, but I think that there's a little bit of an epidemic of loneliness and just disconnect.
Right.
And people just feeling like they aren't connected to anyone, even though we're on our phones all the time.
Yep.
And so if people happen to find connection through your video, with you on camera through your video, I think that means something.
Yeah.
And I think that you can impact people in a way just by connecting with them, even if it's through a camera.
And you probably saw that, like, being on the news desk, like, people probably tuned in because they're welcoming you into their living room.
Into their homes every night.
Into their homes. That's a good word. I like that. Bridget, thanks so much for being on this episode. I almost feel like maybe sometime we should continue this conversation.
Part two?
Maybe
I'd be up for it.
Maybe a part two, and just kind of like I said, we just kind of scratched the surface. And I had so many things going through my head during this. I kind of like lost my train of thought. So that's why I like started reading some of the questions, because I'm like, what? Okay, I just need to stay on track a little bit. But so maybe we can do another part two sometime.
I'm always happy to talk. It's my favorite thing.
All right. Well, Bridget, thanks so much for being on this episode, and have a great rest of the week.
Yes, you too. Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Absolutely.